Good morning and welcome. My name is Michael Bonesteel and I'm co-chair of this event along with Leslie Baum and Scott Hunter of the WCG Clinical Endpoint Solutions and Deborah Carr of Intuit. Scott, say hi.
Can you hear me?
Leslie? There's Leslie. Okay. Deborah is she's on our Zoom chat. So thank you all for joining us both in person and online for the first of our three symposium series, Artists First Conversations, held in conjunction with the exhibition Artists First: 25 Years of Studio Art at Thresholds. Now, this event would not be possible without the support of Kyoko Lerner and the Nathan and Kyoko Lerner Foundation, along with additional support from Intuit, the Center for Intuitive and Outsider Art, and its 2022 grant funding from the National Endowment of the Arts. Our thanks also go out to our partners at the Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs and the special events and Thresholds. I'd like to point out Kyoko Lerner is here. Kyoko, can you wave and say hi? There she is. Our panelists will be addressing questions from both in-house and online audiences at the end of the session. So if you're in person, please fill out the survey and write your questions on the cards you received when you arrived. And those will be collected toward the end of the formal presentations. If you're online with us, please submit your questions to via the chat function on Zoom. Now, if anyone here needs it, the American Sign Language interpreters are on site. So our session moderator today is Scott Hunter, Dr. Scott Hunter. He's the curator of Artists First: 25 Years of Studio Art at Thresholds, the exhibition at the Chicago Cultural Center, concurrent with the symposium series. Scott's a clinical and developmental psychologist specialized in pediatric neuropsychology and an expert on the development and support of persons with neurodevelopmental disabilities and persistent and chronic mental illness. Currently, senior scientific expert in neurodevelopmental and rare pediatric diseases with WCG Clinical Endpoint Solutions, he was faculty in the pediatrics and psychiatry and behavior neuroscience departments at the University of Chicago for more than 22 years, where he served as director of neuropsychology for the hospitals and conducted research related to his expertise. An avid collector of contemporary art and a chair of the advisory board for the DePaul Art Museum, and an independent curator, Scott has a deep engagement with art making by persons with neurodiversity, about which he has published in popular and scientific publications. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's a real pleasure to be here and to meet and spend some time with all of you today. I want to take a few minutes to introduce our panelists, who I'm extremely excited to be talking with. First is, next to me, Kathy Osler, who is an art therapist with Thresholds. Kathy, if you would like to say hi real quick.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Kenneth Williams is an artist who is affiliated with Thresholds. Kenny, please say hi.
Hello, everybody.
And then next to Kenny is Andrew Brower, who is the program director at Thresholds. Please say hi.
Hello.
Thank you. And then we have online with us Nina Katschnig. Nina is the managing director of Galerie Gugging in Austria. Nina, if you'd say hello, please.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you all. What I want to do is to let you know how this is going to go a little bit first. So we're going to start with some opening remarks. I'm going to actually ask Leslie Baum to come up, and she's going to make a couple of opening remarks here. It could be as much as saying hi, and then I'm going to ask our panelists to actually go ahead and, no, okay, so Leslie's saying she's going to wait until the end. Okay, that's fine. No problem. I'm following the schedule, so that's one of the things that I have to do is also be flexible here, as we all will be, as we can best. what I'm going to be doing is actually having each of the panelists talk for a few moments about themselves, about the work that they do, and to think with you and to begin to guide us to addressing today's question, which is the relationship between art making and mental health, and how one who works with individuals who have neurodiversity and mental health differences are individuals who, and how you bring those individuals into utilizing art making as a means of expression about themselves and their experiences, while also supporting them from both a therapeutic and also social standpoint. Following that, I'll have some questions that I'll be posing and starting the conversation, and then we will be pulling in questions from the audience, both online and here in the Cassidy Theater at the Chicago Cultural Center. So with that, I'm going to actually ask Nina if you would go ahead and start for us and tell us both a little bit more about yourself, your program, and your engagement with art making by persons who have mental health challenges, differences, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
So thank you, Scott, and hello from Austria. Yes, I have to turn up the phone right now because I hear me in double. So, can you hear me when I'm just speaking and don't have my tone on? I hope yes.
And we can indeed.
Just give me a little sign. So, fine, good. So, the theme relationship between art making and between art and mental health is interesting me since half of my life, 25 years I'm with this theme, because I studied psychology in Corinthium, my hometown where I'm from, and I had psychology was always interesting for me, but I also wanted to have more practice. So I go to a hospital and worked at the psychiatry, and there was someone painting. And from this time on, I was interested if there is a relationship between the mental health issues and art making. And so I wrote my last thesis for my diploma about art therapy and schizophrenia, and if there is a connection with it. So this was 25 years ago, but what I found out there and what I'm now convinced since then, because this last thesis brought me to Gugging, and because my professor wanted me to go there, and so I went there 25 years ago, and there it was full of surprises. My first visit there at the House of Artists, this was not like psychiatry, what you imagine from a psychiatry. People were there drawing, painting everywhere, art on the walls. So this was like Wonderland, and so fascinating for me that I just asked if I can work there. So since then, I'm there. And now we developed the whole art center. We call it Output Center because now there are many institutions working together. Out from a private company was the development to set up a gallery. This is now 28 years ago. The gallery works for the artists, and since then, just to make them seen, to make them known. The artists live in the House of Artists, and in the house, just 100 meters from the House of Artists, now there is this gallery. Then we founded the private foundation for works to stay and to travel. And then we had the museum and an open studio and a house where so many, how do I say it? many things can happen. Tomorrow we have a concert there, so and the artists enjoy that very much. So what we have is an open studio, and that's the point. We don't offer art therapy. That all the people living in the House of Artists, they are here because they started to work at their homes, in a therapeutical setting, or even it is in a need to draw, and there is and they have their psychological, mental issues. But that's completely secondary. We want to have our focus on that what is good, on the talent. And so we are focused on this theme very much. And of course, the art making is completely important for these people, because it gives them day structure and everything. And it's important to express what their inner words are. But there is no therapeutical approach. That's important to let you know. The issues they have are so mixed up that I have not seen one of them be completely healed. But what is that through the society and recognition, through our work, that's why we stand up every morning. We want them to be seen. We want them to have the same chances like other artists on the art market. And then when they go to their exhibition, when they experience that they are seen, when they experience their success, they feel better, they feel not as patients, they feel as artists, they earn their own money, and this is the approach which is for us relevant and good. We represent the artists like any other artist. So now in the gallery I show many different artists, many also contemporary artists together with the Gugging artists. And there is no difference. That is what I want to say. And everything, what happens there in this open studio is completely free. So freedom is the most important thing here. There is nobody who tells them what they should do or not to do. There are different kinds of materials, and they can use whatever they want. Of course, they develop their style and they find out what they like and what they don't like. But what is the main thing is that there is a talent. They have this talent, and the talent, in my opinion, is untouched by all the other issues they have. They need help in their daily lives, but on the other hand, they are completely free, and they are completely, they know what they want, and they know what they want to express and want to do, and that's it. And everybody of us has so many talents, and talent can be used or not used, but they use it very well. They use it very well, and that's their fun, that's their aim, and they love to show their art, they love to come to the exhibitions, they love to see their clients, their friends, everybody, as any other artist. So, in short, my experience over the last 25 years is that making art is completely important for them, for all those people that are with us, have been with us, and are newly with us, and we are happy to represent. It's important. it gives them day structure, it gives them meaning, it gives them something to do. It is sometimes something bigger than they are, because they feel connected to everything. But it does not heal the main issue they have.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. What is really quite striking from what you're describing with the program is, in fact, some of what I'm aware of the parallels with the programs here in Chicago and more broadly, the United States and across the world, in taking the view that we're talking about art making by artists. These are individuals who do have other challenges, disabilities, but that ultimately the goal is to focus on how to best support these individuals as artists. I'm going to turn now to Kathy and ask Kathy if she'll talk a little bit about herself. A reminder that she is one of the art therapists with Thresholds, and I am very interested in hearing her thoughts and certainly following up on some of what Nina said too. Kathy's going to just move for a moment.
Thank you. And thank you, Nina. It is really refreshing to hear about that kind of program existing where you put the art first. I'm coming from a different background. I'm coming from a mental health agency, as are some of our other speakers, as an art therapist. My background goes all the way back to 1990, when I first started with Thresholds as a young case manager. At that time, art was my avocation, something I did to balance myself with the stress of the job and to help me to integrate what I was experiencing. Eventually, these interests converged when I completed my MA in art therapy and tried to apply it to my work at Thresholds on the west side of Chicago. At that time, creative arts therapies were not provided in these programs. So I worked to introduce them into the established services and culture of the agency. The most successful model at that time was introducing an open art studio during doctor's time, when people were anxiously waiting to see a psychiatrist and had little to do. There were no cell phones. At that time, I noticed how having a quiet, calm space where one can focus on drawing or other arts visibly helped to decrease the anxiety and agitation, opening up conversation and connection for the members involved. Over the years, I expanded my services beyond Austin to different parts of the city, like Englewood, Woodlawn, Lawndale, and the suburbs. All the while, I found that I would have to adapt my approaches to the setting and the people involved to meet them where they were in their recovery. I learned that being flexible and humble were the most important attributes to bring, since what I was asking of people was often foreign, intimidating, or, as often said to me, that's for kids. It was asking a lot to expect people who have experienced trauma, recurring crises, chronic poverty, and systemic racism to see creative arts as anything but trivial or unrelated to their life. However, there were always those who would be drawn to the music or the vibe of a creative space and witness what was going on, eventually drawn in to try it out for themselves. This was the very beginning of the inspiration phase of the creative process, where a person can experiment with a variety of materials, techniques, concepts, until they find something that resonates with them. This is the main goal with each individual in my mind, to offer as many choices as possible, encouraging this process of finding one's creative voice and facilitating their creative development. The repertoire expanded over time to ceramics, fabric arts, building costumes, drama, film, poetry, even music, with the participants leading the way with their creative choices. I tried to avoid saying no, working with artists to find pathways to create what they were visualizing, I saw myself as a conduit to their vision, facilitating and providing resources and information reflecting back their courage and strength. In the Open Art Studio, there were some dedicated artists creating pieces that I felt needed to be recognized outside the walls of thresholds, expressing a need to connect to the greater art world. The strength of their work showed that they were ready for an arts career with established outlets such as Project Onward. I also set out to find new outlets for showing their artwork, such as participating in art fairs, curating a show at the ARC Gallery in Bucktown, and creating public art pieces such as murals and installations. Throughout my years of witnessing various stages of engagement in the creative process, I came to understand that connecting individuals' creativity can create self-reinforcing positive changes in their lives and recovery. I've noticed that many artists working in the Open Art Studio return to familiar symbols and repeat patterns in their work, creating a visual symbolic language of their own. This process of building a symbolic language, trusting one's own choices, and committing oneself to a longer-term project can provide a space for the artist to gain self-compassion and feel more connected to their inner selves. This is a very important element in healing from trauma, where the art can hold the story, allowing the art to separate from the intrusion of overwhelming emotional pain. For example, one significant long-term project involved this artist who had a passion for horror films. He chose to create a story about a monster who was feared and misunderstood by society, a mirror to his internal state. In individual sessions and in the art studio, he worked on creating a costume and filming the creature in the woods over the span of the year, coming up with creative solutions to challenges and feeling empowered by finding his creative voice. In that time, he learned about the process of filming, as did I, and was able to show this as a short film at the ARC Gallery show. At this time, he gained a new identity, a filmmaker. He could separate from his internalized monster and change how he saw himself in the world. Isolation is very damaging for the mind and soul, as we have learned during the pandemic and lockdown. It's very true for a long time. This has been true for a long time, well known by people who suffer from agoraphobia or cognitive disorders that inhibit socialization, leaving people feeling disconnected and alone. I've seen this as one of the most healing elements in the Open Art Studio, where a supportive creative community is formed around common interests and experiences. These connections are heightened in our group work, when we work on group projects in the community, where the group is tasked with thinking through a project from beginning to end, having to collaborate on design and concepts. This is our installation that was at the Oak Park Art League in 2016, which was sponsored by the Art for Social Change program. This piece is titled Over the Wall. It was created with wood, concrete, and handmade ceramic, depicting words associated both with trauma and healing. Hidden behind the wall, which you can't see, is a refuge lined with synthetic fur to represent a safe space. During the group collaboration, the artists were challenged to take new risks, venture into the unknown, be flexible, and build an appreciation of each other's contributions. In 2019, we were chosen in a juried process to complete a mural on the side of the railway in Oak Park. Once again, this was a collaboration which involved risk-taking and learning as we went. During this process, the artists would collaborate on making changes, and the painting would evolve as well as the group, with some people adding their own ideas and inspiration as we went along. While painting right next to a busy street, passersby would wave and call it compliments, which was really a big boost to everybody involved. And connection to society. Suffering from emotional pain and severe anxiety can be more unbearable than physical pain, yet we cannot see it. One's suffering can often be dismissed, or worse, not believed and berated as a moral weakness. As artists who struggle with mental health, there's a long history of mistreatment and stigma that often creates real and internalized barriers to connecting with society. I've worked to facilitate experiences to break down those barriers and open up more opportunities for artists to present their work to the wider public in an authentic way. In 2016, we presented a show at the ARC Gallery entitled Dignity Over Distress, to share the beauty and strength of what thresholds artists can achieve. I'd wanted to provide an opportunity in this show for the artists to engage in social commentary, expressing their true experiences and talent, and even to confront the public. This image is one of the participating artists' Apocalypse series, where he depicted images of his nightmares involving the end of the world. And in his notes about the work, he wrote how every day someone's world comes to an end. A vivid representation of catastrophe and existential dread that shows the intensity of severe anxiety and fears of persecution, which are very real to him. Some of the most rewarding experiences have been facilitating art making out in the community, such as drawing in the park or woods or creating a mural. These projects create a real interface with the greater community. This year, the art group completed a mural on the old sanctuary doors at the Epiphany Center for the Arts, titled Through the Looking Glass. Given the challenge by the Epiphany Center to depict what epiphany means, what is that experience, the artists worked through a brainstorming process, having to make changes when the image or the other artist's ideas need to be accommodated. The result was creating a meaningful image that reflected their own experiences with creativity. In Through the Looking Glass, there is a framework in grayscale that represents the hardships and pressures of modern life, that area. Their eyes that represent internalized judgment and expectations of the greater society. And if you look up close, some of the tiny figures interact with the windows of inspiration when they get close to the fairies. They're breaking through into that plane. Within these windows are vivid motifs that reflect the various artists' personal symbols and style: fairies, birds, and a tree, representing creative growth and holding them together. I wanted to say thank you for letting me share today. I know it took a long time, but I really appreciate it because I'm a consulting art therapist that works on the West Side, and I've worked in various agencies that don't have these programs, so it's nice to be able to share. So thank you very much. But mostly I want to say I feel grateful for being able to work with artists who had the courage to share their whole world, or their whole selves with the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And I really appreciate the sensitivity and the excitement that you shared with us with this work, and the efforts of allowing the artists to actually bring, like we expect from all artists who are making typically as viewers, their worldview, their experience, their engagement, and how they can entice us with that. So it was really, yeah, and I love how this actually pairs so interestingly with what Nina was talking about. We're going to go into a slightly different perspective, but I'm excited because we have Kenneth Williams with us. And Kenneth is an artist who has been involved with Thresholds for a number of years now. I think actually for the full 25-year period that we're covering with the exhibition that's here at the Cultural Center right now. And as a maker, I'm really excited to have him tell us about his experience as an artist and in working with a program that also is a supportive program with regard to how he structures and cares for himself. Thank you, Kenneth. Please jump on board.
Oh, thank you, Scott. Basically, it all started like I was buying art supplies from Walgreens and jewels from my mom's allowance. I would stay in my room all day, every day, just doing my art after school, and a lot of ideas would flow through my mind. As I was going home from back and forth from home to school, I've started drawing a lot of things I was interested in, like street signs, road signs, expressway signs, audio and video equipment, anything I liked motivated me to do art. Because basically everything we use, everything we wear from the top of our heads to the soles of our feet came from a drawing. Everything we see right before us has come from a drawing. It's basically, I have this system called art creates life, and life creates art. So I think this all filters into my artistic method. Like I would basically walk through communities like the Pullman Historic District, Gold Coast, Lincoln Park, Hyde Park, where I once lived twice. And I've got a lot of artistic and cultural enrichment by doing so. But when growing up in Inglewood, and I would see all these vacant lots and boarded up properties and homes and whatnot, that's what motivated me more. Because I think I found my foray into doing buildings and art and homes and whatnot, just by being on the school bus every day. And I would just lock myself into my room, just doing my art, listening to my music, watching TV and whatnot. And even my aunt and my mom would tell you, I would stay up for hours and hours doing a considerable amount of art. There were times I wouldn't even go to sleep at night. I would stay up all night, every night, doing my art at times. Sometimes I think of art in my sleep, and I'm doing art in my sleep.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense, because it sounds like it's been something that's been extremely important for how you've kind of experienced the world and taken in the world, how you make sense of what you see, how you translate what you see into what you would like to see in the world.
Well, basically, the way I see Chicago nowadays, it saddens and depresses me when I see all these vacant lots that haven't been built on for so many years. And every time I look at a lot, whether it be on a commercial street, I see a lot of new stores and theaters and restaurants and whatnot on that same lot, or what could have been on that lot. Basically, I don't draw what's in front of me like most artists do. I think of what could be. I'm a forward-thinking, future-oriented artist. I like to do what can be, what could be. And if I see any vacant lots on a residential street, I vision townhouses, apartments, single-family homes, things that these communities need. A lot of these vacant lots are situated in low-income inner-city neighborhoods like Inglewood, which you previously mentioned. That's where I've grown up at, and that was where my taste in art has really started. And my mom and my aunt had first seen me when I picked up my first art pad, my first set of crayons, my first set of markers. And I would tell them, Mama, I want to draw just like that. Whatever I see out in the city, the buildings, the homes, I love the way they made. I want to draw just like that someday.
So in some ways, your art is also a form of creating architecture.
Yes, exactly. That's what my art is basically based on. Like all these vacant lots you see nowadays, it's like developers that come up with a method called infill redevelopment, as opposed to gentrification. Because I hate the thought of tearing down just to build up. That's what causes gentrification. It causes redevelopment to become even more costly. That's why it's is so slow nowadays because of the costliness of the materials to build with. And I feel that my art can give me a foray into architecture eventually and whatnot, because I've noticed Theaster Gates, and he was a former professor at the University of Chicago. I find myself wanting to become just like him.
So really building for the communities and using your talent as a way of guiding what can be.
Yes, I believe artists are developers too, because artists have opened up a lot of theaters, a lot of galleries, a lot of art schools and whatnot to educate people on art. And there are artists that taught in public schools and private schools and whatnot. I like to believe that artists are the builders of the future, not just the designers.
I think that that's actually a fantastic sentiment, without a doubt. And it really is the case that there's a lot that can be learned from those who are making from a different creative process than necessarily just the traditional design process. I want to ask one question as we are going to prepare to move to our next panelist. But how do you make sense of art as a source of healing for you?
Basically, I use art as like it is a healing process to me. It soothes my mind and heart and spirit. It connects me one-on-one with one-to-one with God and my environment and how to remake it. And the world is like a stage. It's like you playing a part in beautifying it, fixing up the waste areas and whatnot, like developers do. And that's what I want to do. I want to use my art for that purpose, to rebuild all these vacant industrial and residential and commercial and cultural areas, because a lot of these lands can be put back on the tax rolls for the city and the state, generating money for the city for more development. Like instead of using all these TIFs to generate money from taxpayers and whatnot, and they usually prices them out of their homes, but infill redevelopment keeps people in their neighborhoods and in their homes because they want to be a part of the changes in their communities. Like they might see a new bookstore, a new cafe, or a library around the corner and say, "Oh, I want to patronize that business." And like I'm a resident of Bronzeville, and I've seen a lot of new neighbors come in that are non-black, where they be European, which I like to call white folks. And there's a few scores of Hispanics and Asians and Muslims had moved into my area. And one time I was taking out the garbage, and in my back porch I saw a European American family throwing snowballs and building snow people and whatnot. And I like to be that neighborly. I'm gonna be like, I like to help that person's bags, help that person with his or her bags, his or her furniture, help him or her move in, cut his or her grass. I want to be neighborly. I like to call myself the Barack Obama of the art world. I like to unify people. I've been around different races and cultures of artists, and I like to form my own artist community someday. I like to be one of those artists who built mixed income and mixed use artist communities for artists like me. Photographers, musicians, architects themselves, art teachers themselves, because I like them all to be my neighbors someday.
That's fantastic. What I'm so impressed by, as we're talking about, is that in a lot of ways, so much of what is kind of a pathway between the process of art making and mental health is community building, is actually activism to create new ways of looking at how the world can be and making that happen. Thank you for sharing that with us, Ken.
I would love to be one of those people someday, one of those pioneers.
That's fantastic. And I hope to see that too.
Oh, you will, believe me.
I'm not doubting that. I'm not doubting that. Thank you, Kenneth. So
Sure,
now,
Scott, my pleasure.
I'm going to now ask our next panelist, Andy, to share with us about himself and also about his view of art and mental health and their relationship. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Again, my name's Andy. I am a program director at Thresholds, where I oversee 4 outreach teams and 1 clinic-based therapy team. That team has on it 3 art therapists and 2 interns that practice both group and individual art therapy with individuals that we serve. So my introduction into what I would say is like expressive arts came shortly after my undergrad experience, where I worked at a boarding school in Indiana called Culver Academy. There, one of my supervisors was really big into play therapy and specifically sand tray therapy. And she encouraged me to get additional training and certifications in those creative expressive therapy outlets. And I think it was there that I just started to really first learn about the magic that can happen in these types of therapeutic, less verbal ways of doing therapy. And specifically, 2 things struck me there. The first was, especially I think with youth at least, it was very easy to break down the walls of engagement when using these creative, expressive ways of working with folks. And 2, I spoke on a minute ago, was more of like the piece that these processes that happen in a therapeutic setting don't always have to be verbal. And so as you watch sand trays develop over time in series with folks, you can see resolution come through those and continue to watch people find balance in their life with the things that they're dealing with and past traumas and whatnot. And so that was kind of my introduction, I guess, into expressive arts type of work. A few years later, I found Thresholds, which I at first thought I would work at Thresholds for a few years and just get a little bit experience. But I quickly fell in love with the work that we do there, the persons that we serve. We refer to our clients as members, so if I use that word, that's what that's referring to. And overall, just the way that Thresholds approaches the work that we do, the culture around how we care for the community that we serve. So as you might imagine, in some cases, some of the folks that we work with have difficulty forming trusting relationships, and art is for many a very personal experience. And so thankfully, over time, I was led into some of the lives of the individuals that I was working with and was able to see the various types of expressive arts, whether that's writing or music making or visual art work that they did. And we, in some cases with the folks that we were working with, were able to help bridge the gap between art and creative expression and employment, helping, I recall one person who found an outlet around hairdressing and hair cutting and whatnot, and was very creative in that arena, and helping him build like a side business from that, as well as Kenny was mentioning, from our head to our toes, right? Everything is art, everything we see in front of us, and so folks expressing themselves through the clothes they wear, the makeup they put on, the whatnot, and so and how that relates to what's going on in their internal world as well was an experience that I was led into as well. And then kind of more on a personal note, we were also, Kathy was just talking, I guess, about how when she started at Thresholds, she found art as an outlet for the day-to-day experiences that she was having in working at Thresholds. And I think for the first time, I became consciously aware of how I also was needing those kind of outlets. I was definitely investing a lot of energy into like culinary arts, and that was a big relief for me and a good balance for me with what I was doing during the day. And then, kind of fast forward to just a couple weeks ago when Scott asked and the group here asked me to be part of this symposium, I thought, well, gosh, man, I'm not trained in art therapy techniques. I don't know a ton about art. Am I like really an expert here to be able to speak here? But I also then thought, well, that's kind of what all this is about too, to some degree. And so I started reflecting back of different challenges that I've experienced in my life, and gosh, man, how did I get through those? What were those things that were a part of that time period for me? And I'm thinking about the writings that I did, watercoloring, collage making, and yeah, then later the culinary that I just mentioned. And those were ways that I found to get balance back in my life. And yeah, so for the last 3 years, I've been supervising the art therapy program at Thresholds, where I got to work directly with art therapists. And it's just been really outstanding to watch and magical to watch the art therapist work with the artist and our members, and to hear the members talk about how their experience with that art making process has been, for them to talk about their artwork with pride and strength and a sense of accomplishment. The last thing I'll share is, I think, pretty relevant to this conversation and some of the things that have came up, and also really struck me when I first started overseeing the art therapy program on the north side here at Thresholds. I remember asking very early one of the artists, because I was new to this, to like really art making in therapy, and we were putting on a show, which we do about twice a year on this team. And I asked the most senior art therapist, how do you avoid falling in this possible pit trap of evaluating the work as good or bad? And how do you keep members who we're working with from falling that same kind of arena? And honestly, I don't remember what the art therapist replied to me, so sorry about that, Claire, if you're out there watching. But what I've kind of come to discover on my own is, well, I think first off, when we're doing therapy with individuals, we don't evaluate what someone's telling us as good or bad. Right? We don't take that viewpoint. So why would we treat the art differently than that? So that was one thing. And then the other piece is similarly, like when I compare it to like traditional talk therapy, I often think of, well, it's good when it works, when it helps people towards recovery, when it helps them find balance or find resolution to things that are going on in their life. And in that way, I've been able to, I guess I can proudly say that all of the work that I've witnessed has been really good. So,
Hopefully man is included.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful to hear, and I share that experience. with you. As someone who, I didn't say much about myself after Michael's wonderful introduction, but I always was interested in making from a very young age. I grew up in a family with a lot of people, mostly in the musical arts, but also who were involved in the visual arts as well. And it was a part of my experience to think about the world from that perspective and not to think of it from a judgment experience. And so it was really important to me as I was becoming a clinician and training to really better understand how, for individuals who make, art holds many different roles, and that, first and foremost, the making process is a way of gaining an experience of oneself, an understanding of oneself and what's important, but it also plays often, I observed, even individuals who are not in a treatment mode experience, it has a healing element in terms of releasing some of what is internal as their emotional and their thinking processes. It's a way of problem solving. And what you're describing is really that bridge. What I've heard from all four of you has been really a reminder and kind of a recapturing for myself that what can take place is a means of supporting who the artist is and where they hold their strengths and their weaknesses and how they can bridge that. With that, I want to ask a few questions, and then I'm going to definitely open up and be sharing questions that are coming in. So for those of you who are online, please put questions in, and then we're going to open up to questions in the audience as well. But one of the things that I want to ask first, Andy and Kathy, is how do you guide an individual who's not been involved in art making themselves as an active process towards getting involved in making as both that therapeutic experience, but also as a way of connecting with themselves? And I'll let either of you jump in first.
Okay. Well, it's just like approaching anybody with them in mind, meaning that the process starts with what they want, always. And I guess, and that's always going to be the guide. And some people just don't want to. And I think it's important to ask about people's history with making art, because sometimes people have had bad experiences, bad teachers, or been in situations where they were made to feel less than because of the judgmental nature that sometimes exists. So you have to be careful about that.
Without a doubt, that makes a lot of sense. And the emphasis on approaching a person where they're coming from and where they want to be, I think, is key. Andy, what would you like to add to this?
Yeah, I think I would definitely echo that for sure, and just think about the person that's in front of me. And for me, I think I would go back to, like, what are this person's interests and what are their strengths, and how can I relate that to creative expressions, and not, I think, be directive on the style of what that could be, that you can see art in a lot of different ways, and you can be expressive in using different modalities, I guess, to kind of reach that goal too. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Then hopefully that would make it less like less as a barrier, right? Because people have had bad experience of, let's sit down and do this one thing that, and wondering about being judged or critiqued on it or whatever. So.
Creativity has all sorts of pathways, like music and writing,
Very true.
poetry, and like all different paths. And so I think it's okay to not be visual art centric about it.
I would agree with that as well, particularly as somebody who came into the arts through music, as opposed to making in different ways. Although, as somebody whose primary emphasis as a clinician has been in the pediatric world, what I found that's a little different than in working with adults is that there's more of an automaticity to making art for a lot of kids that, unfortunately, we then, unless someone is really engaged in, I think what ultimately becomes the mindset for becoming an artist, a lot of people let go of that. And so, yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. I want to pull Nina in, and then I'm going to change the topic a little bit, but then I'm going to come back to Kenny because I want to actually, and the other panelists here too, because I think that this is an important component about the programs that we're talking about here, because within the consideration of the relationship between art making and mental health with this discussion, we're really also engaging with programs that have been established to support artists who have disabilities and differences, and to provide avenues for them to be whole people. Nina, as someone who has been very involved in creating this community for artists who have an array of mental health, and from as I'm understanding with Galerie Gugging, other disabilities that may be at play too, how do you, as the person who's involved with this program, negotiate the balance between art as commerce, which we all know there is a large element of that in our society, and as a collector, it's something that I'm actively involved in, and that same art making as a process for those who are involved in the program, for developing their resilience, their self-reliance.
Mm-hmm. So the resilience, the self-reliance, it's a self-esteem that grows. The self-esteem is completely growing when
I think have we lost you? Oh. Hello? We've lost the sound here. Can you hear me? You can hear me through the mic. Okay. Nina, did we lose you? I wasn't sure if you were finished. So it sounds like we might have lost her with that. We'll come back to that. I'm going to actually turn the question to Andy and to Kathy too, because one of the key things that has been so impressive to me
So am I back
you're here.
again?
Oh,
I cannot hear.
You're back now, yes.
Anybody?
Can you hear us?
Now I can hear you again.
Okay, good. Yeah,
Good.
Yeah, great. If you want to finish, please.
So I don't know how much you have heard. Can you help me?
I can. You were talking about building self-esteem as a key component of the program.
Yeah. As I mentioned before, our artists we have the luck to work with, they have complex issues. So that means it's a chronic issues. They don't get much better. But what happens is the self-esteem and that society, and this is then we are also in this thing of, reflecting back what society is. Society treats somebody better when it's a very well-known artist that a patient, and that's what they can feel, and that means they feel better, and that's the point. And art always is helping in this way that they are now accepted by society, and that's the point, and that's good.
I think you're hitting on something that is really quite important in terms of what I've come to understand with programs that then support the opportunities for artists to bring their work out to the public, to share their work with the public, and to also become like what many artists aspire to do, individuals who are making their living or a part of their living through their work with that. Mm-hmm. So I think that you've hit on something very, very key in terms of how one becomes a maker. Kathy, I'll kind of throw it to you first and then to Andrew, and then I want to pull Ken into talking about this as well.
I really like what Nina was saying about how it's a process of building, and building your sense of self, building your self-esteem is crucial, because sometimes a lot of the people we work with, it's a chronic issue, and accepting all of yourself makes your life, it's about, I guess, improving the quality of life, having meaning in life, and having yourself reflected out in the world in the way that you want to be, I guess.
Thank you. Andy.
Yeah, the thing I guess that I was thinking about too, as Nina was speaking, is the idea that a lot of the times we end up measuring things based on ideas that we create, right? And so like the idea of somebody's condition not improving, if you look at like the criteria of a diagnosis, for instance, that perhaps there are aspects of that diagnosis that any kind of therapy might not actually help that symptom go away completely, but there are like what I would refer to as like secondary effects of having diagnoses and being a person who lives in a world where they're viewed differently because of those diagnoses that very much get worked on, or whether there's like recovery in those areas, and it's like life satisfaction and self-esteem and being proud of who you are and things like that are the recovery process for many of the folks that we work with. The stabilization in those areas are not further deterioration, and also like the community building that comes from being in open studios together with other artists, other people with shared life experiences too. And so socialization improves, and then all of those different things that I've already mentioned that many of us have. It is a lot of those elements of recovery for us, and how the therapy helps with.
That's really that's thoughtful in the sense that it's creating both a process whereby individuals feel more engaged with what is considered to be very important in our society, the social elements, but at the same time it's also helping them negotiate what's with that process too, and to see themselves in a way that is more whole. I appreciate that. Kenny, I want to ask you, as somebody who is involved with both Thresholds and with Project Onward, how do you find for yourself the experience of having your work go out into the world and the sales that happen with that? What is that like for you?
I think it's a great revelation because there's a connect between artists and their customers and whatnot, and between art and the community, and between art connecting with fantasy and reality. Because I believe without fantasy there'd be no reality. Without art there'd be no reality. Art creates reality itself. Everything we see before ourselves is created by art. Like God built us, for instance. He made us his creation in whatever you see, the mountains, the lakes, the rivers, the streams, and all of that. And I like to believe that my art skills and my art ideas all flow from him. And every time I create a piece, I say a prayer, please, Lord, help me do this piece the way you want it done. Because you're the great builder, you're the great creator, and I'm a creator because of you. And basically, and art makes dreams come true, and our dreams are the future of this world. And art emphasizes that. And I remember when Leslie had first started her workshop. I was there the very first day, and she started me off on a big piece of paper and whatnot. And I did a downtown skyline and whatnot. And after I was done with that, she was like, "Here you are again, Kenny, try another one." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, what am I gonna do with this? Come on, Lord, get my ideas in order, get my mind and my heart and my spirit working on this." And whatnot. And then she would give me one big piece after another and after another and after another. I feel like I came through a brick wall without a scratch. And she's the type of art counselor who would do that, because I believe during my years of doing art and whatnot, I believe that artists are great educators, economicists, builders, developers, working class citizens who bring about economic diversity, racial diversity, cultural enlightenment, and social prosperity.
Thank you. That was really helpful to get I think, an important perspective on how art is so deeply integrated into your worldview, and how you use that as a way of also bringing a sense of satisfaction, as well as kind of the resilience that you show as you're negotiating your life.
Right.
Yeah.
Basically, moreover, Scott, I also like to say, bear with me, I'm a bit nervous here.
That's quite all right. You're doing fantastic, and I can't tell you how happy we are to have you with us. So.
And when we artists have people buy our work, they're building our community. They're helping to build our community. Basically, they're helping us get the services we need, like because there are artists that need housing, education, and legal representation, the services that we're not getting. And I see nowadays that there's an exodus of artists outside of Chicago. They leave Chicago due to high taxes, high rents, and skyrocketing inflation. And I've wrote very many letters to my Democratic executive leaders, whether it be Harold Washington, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, J.B. Pritzker, and Joe Biden, because I believe that the Democrats are the leaders in using art as a social and economic engine. And I think Pritzker has done a big job of that. And ever since Pritzker got elected, there wasn't a single budget cut, not one. Can't say the same for Blagojevich or Rauner.
This is true. You're hitting on Illinois politics very well, and definitely Pritzker is invested in the arts. Pritzker, for those who are outside, J.B. Pritzker is the governor of Illinois.
And moreover, Scott, let me interject once again. Basically, artists are the builders of our communities. I feel like whenever I do a piece, I feel like I'm building my own Chicago. And every time I look around Chicago, I feel like I was the one building those buildings and those houses. Because I'd be like, if I did, they'd probably be looking better than they are now.
Well, and we have behind us on the screen, and I hope those of you at home are seeing too, one of Kenny's wonderful pieces, and it really is a reflection of a way in which Chicago has looked and how it is being brought back in some ways too. So thank you with that.
Welcome.
I want to bring up a question that we have from our audience. We have a couple of questions here. First one is from Sue, that art is such a tangible representation. It reveals so many things in terms of a person's health and well-being, and yet, when an organization like the one I work within goes to seek funding, so often the grants request data that supports success. How can we articulate and measure success for these type of art programs? I'm going to actually start here with Andy and Kathy, but then I'm going to actually get a little bit of a sense from Nina how that works in Austria too. So, Andy.
Gosh, yes, definitely a challenge there that's before us, right? Like the focus on evidence-based practices and measuring outcomes with the criterias that we set it's very much defined by us. It depends where we set the bar. What measure are we looking at, right? Are we looking at life satisfaction? Are we looking at self-esteem? Are we looking at socialization? How do we gather that kind of data? It's a lot easier to ask people questions or to take, I don't know, blood levels or whatever kind of like really hard objective measure, and yet a lot of the times those aren't the ones that we see in the recovery that our members aim for. So going back to, I guess, the question of like how do we convince funders perhaps that there's good work being done here, I think is a tough one to answer. I think a lot of it is around like a lot of advocacy around this just being different, and we're not going to hit the marks that you want to see. We need to change what kind of marks we're hitting, and then you will see them, and I think you'll see good success, and we'll be proud of what that looks like. I don't know.
Yeah, that's I can say from somebody who's been involved for many years in the in dealing with considerations about mental health and neurodiversity and development through a more medical lens, as opposed working in a medical center, but ultimately also how do we translate what is success based on where the person finds themselves and where they stand too. Yeah. Kathy, your thoughts?
I can't pretend to understand funding.
You're not alone.
I think it would be interesting to ask people who participate is how they would feel about us taking it away.
I think you're hitting on the key piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, Kenny, you were sharing with us that the activism that's important most is ensuring that there's continued funding to support the lives of individuals who need that help, right?
Of course, because I do believe that art has a lot of political and financial and social and economic clout to it, basically.
Certainly.
And art enforces a lot of the things that go on in life. I mean, we engage in activism too. We artists are the voices for the voiceless, and a lot of them put that into their art too. Basically, it's just like what Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris did for martial arts, and what Elvis Presley and the Beatles did for rock. For rock and roll, I want people to talk about what Kenneth Williams did for the art world.
I like hearing that, without a doubt. Nina, I want to get a sense from you about that question that we had posed in terms of the considerations of funding and how they impact decision making with regard to the health and the safety and security of the artists where you are.
Yeah, I have to say, as I mentioned before, there are many different companies working together for the artists in our house. There's, and the private society we have, where also the Open Studio. They run the Open Studio. It belongs to the House of Artists. They have the funds from the government. How safe that is? The last decades it was okay, but nowadays you cannot say. And so always, the goal is to become more independent. So when there are artists in the Open Studio and they produce over a very long time, produce is not a nice word, but you know what I mean, because they have to do their art. Then you can have in a few years or 1 year, it sometimes takes time, an oeuvre, and then you can say, okay, that's interesting. Do you work with us? Or and then we can show the art in the gallery, and then they can earn the money. And earning the money is much more better than to rely on funds. So to become independent from these funds is, that's the idea.
That is, it's interesting to hear because it's a different experience for programs in different countries, as I've come to understand over time. And in some ways, what you're describing is also some of what I think is key to what happens here in the United States too, which is where we really do look to building opportunities that allow artists who have differences that have required certain types of supports to be able to be more independent in terms of meeting their life goals with that too, and not having to feel that they are relying so much on others, and that they feel more self-sufficient with that. We've had some really very interesting questions come in, and I apologize because we'll only probably be able to get to one, maybe two more, but because I really like hearing what the different perspectives are with this. One question that was interesting to me as I was looking through these was a question that one of the individuals here in the theater provided. Do you think it's important to connect art making with healing and mental health in larger public institutions like schools and museums? And how might you envision that? I'm going to start with you, Kathy.
I like the idea of that a lot, because I see how not just having art making going on, but having people with an art background in different spaces kind of brings a different kind of thinking. And not just, like I was talking about in my presentation about being in a clinic, essentially, and being in a waiting room of a clinic, and bringing art into that space. I mean, a lot of times I am bringing art into unusual spaces, and it changes the mood. It really does. It makes things more, brings a studio to a different setting, which is, I don't know, I like the idea.
Your thoughts, Andy?
Yeah, I would echo that. My question would be, why not, right? More so, right? I think, I definitely believe in the healing power of creative expression and finding ways to integrate those into more communities that are, in often cases, there's struggles and challenges happening there that could benefit from, similar to Kathy's story of being, observing this need in this waiting room and just bringing out art supplies and, healing our processes of anxieties being reduced. Sure. and whatnot. So
sure. To piggyback that, another question that came in from Chris here is, and Kathy, I'm going to put this to you directly as we're kind of coming towards the endpoint for our discussion today. What is the best way for the question is, what is the best way for disadvantaged and neurodisabled artists? I would add a kind of a broader standpoint for individuals who have challenges, differences, and disabilities, who are artists, to have opportunities to make and have their work seen and sold.
Well, it sounds like Nina's gallery or Project Onward are good places. And I think there should be more of that. And I would like to see in the art world more opening up of those spaces to neurodivergent people, where the galleries, museums are trying to be more inclusive.
I think that that's a wonderful place for us to kind of come to a summation, because I think what was great to hear about from you, Nina, your program, is that it is one like ones here in Illinois and across the country that have developed as a way of providing an opportunity to see individuals who are neurodivergent, who have mental health challenges, as artists first, and to be able to approach them in their lives in the way that we think about when we engage all of us in society and the opportunities that may be presented, and particularly makers with that. And I will say, as someone who's been involved from the collecting, as well with the opportunities that I've had to develop and curate exhibitions of work by artists with neurodivergence and other disability presentations, that there's a greater interest in now bringing forward what was called at one point in time kind of an outsider consideration for art. And I think that there are many of us, and I think it really is reflective of the discussion we've had today, where that we're not approaching from that standpoint. We're really thinking about art making by people who have the value and the opportunity to be a part of what is already a broad art world.
I just wanted to give one quick example of why. So last night, actually, I took a member to see his own work in a show that kind of last minute I kind of pushed him to enter into, because it was about housing, something that he was very, very upset about, knowing about the terrible issues in our housing system. And so I'm like, why don't you put it into a piece of art and put it in this show? And he did. And it was really cool to see it there, but without him participating, this show would have been a lot of other people who weren't in that experience putting their artwork in about other people who are suffering. Because you could tell a lot of this was people who weren't, ever experienced being unhoused, thinking about it. But here's somebody who's actually lived it and putting their voice into the mix. And I think that brings a lot.
I am really appreciative of you sharing that, because I agree 100%. And I think we've heard that today from Ken as well, which is that there is a way of really showing that what life can be and what life is like and what it means by artists. And so I really appreciate that we've had this opportunity to think about the fact that, even in a program where the focus is really on being an artist and being a part of the world, or in a program where art is integrated into the therapeutic process, the piece that's key here is the resilience that it's building. With that, I want to thank everyone for being with us today. I'm going to now turn it over to Michael for some closing comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and it's been a fascinating session, and I want to invite everyone to join us again on November 19th and December 10th for the next two sessions. Please visit the Artist First exhibition on view in the Cultural Center here downstairs, and for those on site, we have this space until half past the hour, till 12:30. So please feel free to meet our speakers in person, and thank you and have a great day.